Hello, boys and girls. Welcome in to the Boys and Girl Podcast with Cowboys NFL Network reporter Jane Slater and NFL Network producer Bobby Belt. A Cowboys community with the inside scoop on the Dallas Cowboys. Now, coming straight to you from the Lone Star State, here's Jane and Bobby.
Well, it was a nice departure going and covering a few other teams last week, so I appreciate Bobby stepping up and our amazing guest. But unfortunately, fans, I'm back. So, hi, how are you? We have a lot to talk about as it relates to the Cowboys. When I think of this team this year and the expectations after Jerry Jones finally made the gutting decision that led to Jason Garrett showing up the building every day with a binder underneath his arm and dutifully hoping that he would get a stay of execution. Cowboy fans celebrated not only the draft pick of CeeDee Lamb, but a coach with skins, Mike McCarthy. Hasn't exactly translated into the season that they had hoped for and were expecting. Some of it has to do with injuries, Bobby, and we'll get to those in a second, but a lot of teams are having to deal with injuries this year.
Yeah, I mean, the team the Cowboys have coming up here, the Browns, they've got a lot of injuries to deal with. I mean, the Seahawks had, a lot of patchwork stuff that they were doing last Sunday against the Cowboys. And so injuries are an excuse. They're not necessarily a good excuse, though, for this Cowboys team. I mean, I think they definitely are missing some guys. They probably feel a little bit like we're not going to know who we are for real until probably mid-October when Randy Gregory gets reinstated fully. You get hopefully Leighton Vander Esch back and some of these corners start getting healthy. So it may be a situation where the Cowboys are just kind of, we're going to fight and we're going to get as best we can until we get healthy. And that's not necessarily an excuse that they're giving. It's just this is the way it's got to be. And we got to kind of make do a little bit because they are decimated in the secondary. They've had issues at linebacker. They've had issues along the offensive line. They lost Blake Jarwin, their starting tight end. And so, I mean, they've definitely had those issues. The thing that they don't want, you can't really do anything about injuries. You just adapt as best you can. The thing they don't want is they can't have 3 drops and, 2.5 yards per touch from Ezekiel Elliott. They can't have Jalen Smith missing, tackles consistently and still being a, $60 million guy. They can't have Dak Prescott turning the ball over. They need to have him protecting the ball. They can't have, some of these occasional Amari Cooper focus drops. You expect injuries, you deal with those. What you can't have is all of that. And then along in the secondary, you can't have guys just making really low IQ reads and busted coverages, stuff that doesn't seem to even be a factor of trying to learn a new defense. This just seems like flat out low IQ stuff of not recognizing whose assignment is whose.
I think back to Jalen Smith's comment too about throwing it out there a little bit that maybe they need to simplify the playbook. If our fans aren't familiar with that one, let's play that one real quick.
Do you think simplifying things the defense could benefit the group?
Absolutely.
In what way?
I believe just allowing us more opportunities to hound in on what we're actually going to run in our game plan. I believe it's important that each and every player knows in and out what they have to do. And with a smaller playbook, it gives us a better opportunity to do that. And like I said, it's about us growing each and every week. The coaches are on the same page, the players are on the same page, and we're just trying to do whatever it takes to get that much better each and every week.
Is that players that aren't capable of learning this playbook, or is it possibly too complicated? I don't know, but I got to tell you, for all the people that wanted Rod Marinelli out of here, haven't been overly impressed with Mike Nolan's defense. Now, again, injuries are an issue. I mean, you lose Gerald McCoy, you lose Leighton Vander Esch, you lose your 2 starting corners, Anthony Brown and Chidobe Awuzie. But even when they were healthy in that first game, I didn't think this team looked that good.
No, and it's one of those things where, not even to mention, he's been healthy for the season, but Jordan Lewis missed all of camp.
Where's Xavier Woods, too?
Yeah, Xavier Woods was a big part of your problem last Sunday against the Seahawks. But I think overall, yeah, everybody's got to step up. It was funny. We had Chidobe Awuzie had the funny line during training camp when they asked him, did you think about opting out at all? And he said, nope, contract year, baby. And there's a lot of guys back there right now in contract years. Jordan Lewis, Cheeto. You've got Xavier Woods is another one. And it's fascinating that they're seeming to have these issues, not just with, again, the adjustment or skill players opposite them. They're just dropping the ball in terms of knowing really basic fundamental stuff that should have been all ironed out already. And you can say maybe that's an issue with you didn't have some of the same lead up time or some of the same work that you would normally get. But everybody had those same sort of issues, and not everybody is having these same sorts of just busted coverage touchdowns. I think there's 4 already on the year that were just left wide open by somebody not knowing an assignment, including 3 last week against the Seahawks. And so, as much as we heard some of the guys complaining after Chris Richard left that, hey, look, we weren't allowed to do certain things. We were limited in what we were allowed to do. They just wanted us to play this and just give it our all in that, context and not try and do anything different. And then Cheeto talking about, it's great. We're not statues anymore pre-snap. We're moving around. Guys don't know what we're doing. And then you see some of these blunders and you kind of wonder maybe the last coaching staff had a good grasp on what you were able to handle. And you thought you could handle more, and that coaching staff knew you couldn't. And so they were making the best of it. And now Mike Nolan's potentially having to learn that himself.
Yeah, I mean, it is fascinating. And I do think the Cowboys are going to get a pass this year, especially in management, because they're going to be able to point to the fact, well, we've heard the excuses. They didn't have the preseason ramp up. The injuries, Mike McCarthy has talked about, this is not how you wanted to start your season. Again, I get all of it. But there's a lot of new coaches, right? Kevin Stefanski, who we're going to see. I mean, look at how improved the Browns are looking. Now, when we look at the quality of opponents, I think we can both agree that the Cowboys have had some tough ones to start this season, and it's not going to really get any easier. I mean, they've got the Giants will get easier for them the following week. Monday Night Football, Arizona Cardinals, that ain't going to be easy. I don't know if I'm overlooking Washington at this point. And then you've got, I believe, Philadelphia, which, might give you a little confidence back. But the schedule hasn't been easy when we look at the strength of their opponents either.
No, it hasn't been. But, I mean, again, it also doesn't get much easier. You've still got games against Pittsburgh and Baltimore down the stretch. You mentioned Arizona. I don't know how exciting it is for the Cowboys to, have to game plan with how much the Cowboys seem to have issues with chasing, eye candy and then getting lost in over pursuit. I don't know how exciting it is for the Cowboys that they're going to have to go against Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson and those sorts of issues they're going to have when they're in open space.
I think the one thing that is, I said this week because the Cowboy fans, they get so worked up. I mean, Cowboys Twitter is something that is marvelous, quite frankly, especially when the team is not performing.
I will say, though, I don't know if you would agree with this. I think that the fan base has been relatively calm for a 1-2 season. I think if this was 1-2 under Garrett, there would be much more burn it all down. There almost seems to be some.
They're conditioned. There's apathy now.
They've given it. They've almost. They're giving some leeway here that is unusual for the fan base. I feel. I mean, they're still upset, but I don't think they're doing the normal. Every loss with Jason Garrett was we're getting the number 1 pick, and now it's kind of like, well, we're still going to win the division though. This is a bad division.
Yeah, they're just not good right now. And
that's exactly what it comes down to. They are not very good right now.
And it's funny because I still hear it from some of my friends. It's fascinating. People see what they want to see. We'd be doing better if we didn't have Dak. And I'm sitting there going, you might not have won a game this year without Dak Prescott. I mean, that Falcons game was all Dak. Yeah. Are they getting off to a slow start? Sure, I'll give you that. But Dak, I think, has been willing these teams into wins that they shouldn't be winning, and he's gotten them close. We can talk about the inability to get started and get going early because it seems like that's a hangover from last year. So, again, I think we have to start saying this isn't necessarily the coaching staff. Maybe it is, in fact, the personnel.
Well, you remember last year that we asked them consistently in the locker room, what's with the slow starts? Is this about preparation? And every player, especially I remember Jalen Smith was super aggressive about it when we would ask him about it. And Jalen Smith would say, these are not, preparation issues. This is not a Monday through Saturday issue. This is a Sunday issue. These are day of mistakes. This is about execution, not about preparation. I'll say that I think in a few instances, in fact, just about all these games so far, I think you could make an argument they've looked flatter this year than any time they did last year. And so it makes me wonder if maybe the McCarthy preparation at this point, it's still trying to find its footing. Maybe the McCarthy preparation isn't as solid in terms of getting them prepared for all possibilities on game day the way Jason Garrett's was. So now you're compounding a little bit poorer preparation with guys who still are making day of mistakes, and it's causing you to fall down 20-0 to the Falcons, 30-15 to the Seahawks, and looking at, some trouble coming up this weekend with, Austin Hooper, a Pro Bowl tight end, Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry, Pro Bowl receivers, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, Pro Bowl running backs, and a really strong offensive line there in Cleveland. And so I think that they can't really afford to get off to another slow start. If Cleveland comes out guns blazing and torches your secondary and gives you trouble there, and Dak is having to dig you out of another 14-0 hole or 21-0 hole, and you're, doing some of the things you've done in these first few games, busted coverages, fumbling 5 times in one quarter. I don't know.
And if you don't think for a second Baker Mayfield is going to smell himself if he gets off to a quick start at AT&T Stadium, a place he's very familiar with, and what I believe is going to feel a little bit more home field advantage for him. I also think just not having the fans in the stands, I know people, and Jerry's talked about, he wants to ramp it up a little bit more. We'll see what that looks like. We're at 75% capacity here for restaurants and bars and things along those lines here in the state of Texas.
What was the attendance against Atlanta? It was 21 something?
21, a little over 21,000.
Yeah, and Jerry said, I think on Friday on 105 Through the Fan with KNC Masterpiece, I believe he said he was aiming for 25,000. And I got to say, I don't know about you. We didn't get a chance to talk about this because you were off last week, and I didn't chat much about it, but I did feel like there was some crowd noise pumped in. They were, able to do that. But I felt like the crowd did a pretty decent job with, as, scattered as they were, at least creating some sort of, NFL game atmosphere. I felt like there was actually some sort of it felt more like football than some of these other games you're seeing with empty stadiums. I think even a little bit of fans does help a team.
Oh, for sure. And, when I was in Jacksonville and talking to the players about it, one of the players, it was Laviska Shenault, said it best. He was like, we play this game for the fans. Like, a lot of these guys play for the fans. And when they talk about it's freshman JV football energy, it really is. And so, look, there's a lot of mitigating factors, I think, that have contributed to the Cowboys literally not even meeting expectations this year. But I think it's very possible you could have a team that finishes worse than an 8-8 record. I truly believe that, given some of the injuries and the schedule.
It is, and I think it's also possible that I think there are several possibilities. I think it's not outside the realm possibility this team goes 6-10, misses the playoffs, and it's a disaster. I think it's not outside the realm possibility that they right the ship and they go 11-5, and they are one of the better teams in the NFC. I think it's possible they go 8-8, 7-9, and end out winning the division as like a 500 team, and then, get into the playoffs as a team that could either get roasted in the first round or could be one of these teams that's a tough out because you never know which team is going to show up. That was the issue last year.
Or it could be like the Eagles team when they won the Super Bowl. It's like
you never know.
Anything is possible. I'm just saying right now, watching this team, they're not good.
No, and it's specifically on defense, I'd say.
And I think what's maddening, I'm sorry to interrupt you, I think what's maddening is they look good when their backs are against the wall. I mean, they do things where you sit there and you're like, why can't they sustain this energy and enthusiasm for this game for 4 quarters starting in the first? Because if you just look at that Atlanta Falcons game, break it up, and you look at the first half versus the second half, 2 completely different football teams.
Yeah, especially on offense. And, it's funny. Remember, it was 2018. line driven into the ground was backs against the wall mentality, that they got 3 and 5 and then they rattled off, 6 wins in a row or whatever they did. And it is bizarre that they almost need that sort of, and I remember that was a conversation last year because they were consistently losing in the first quarter. They almost need to be in panic mode to wake up.
They need a sports psychologist. Some people flourish in chaos.
Yeah.
They literally thrive for chaos. I feel like that's the Cowboys.
Yeah, and I think
they need a Windy Rhodes from Secession.
I think
to literally get in their heads. They need a sports psychologist.
I think that's particularly true about the defense. I think the offense has been moving the ball generally pretty well. The Atlanta game was brutal. That was lack of prep. I don't know what that was. That was a focus issue. You don't fumble 5 times because that defense is all world. You fumble 5 times because you've got your own issues.
Well, Seattle's not a great example either, my friend.
No. But I'm just saying that they were moving the ball against Seattle pretty consistently. They scored early on. They had 15 at halftime. They'd scored 2 touchdowns by halftime. They took the lead against the Rams either by halftime or early in the third quarter. I can't remember. And so they are moving the ball well on offense, but on defense, you're right. Because on defense, it's, I think against the Falcons, they had finally locked it up and there were like 3 possessions in a row where the Falcons didn't score. And then against the Seahawks, they didn't score after the interception and quick touchdown to start the third quarter. The Seahawks didn't score again until that touchdown with, a minute left, 2 minutes left. And so the defense, for some reason, seems to get into this critical point where it's like, you literally cannot now allow another score. No matter how many times we give Dak the ball, no matter how many times they score, if you give up another one, that's going to be one too many. And then they sort of lock down. And so that to me is a sign of an immature team, a team that needs that sort of motivation in order to just play their game. That is an immature young football team to me. Which is inexcusable.
If because it's been so up-tempo for them and given the injuries on defense, if that's necessarily a good thing for the defense.
Bucky Brooks said this. I know Bucky Brooks talked to DallasCowboys.com. He said that if he was helping game plan for the Cowboys, he would be trying to slow things down, run the ball a little bit more, keep them off the field, not necessarily because of tiring them out, but keep them off the field to limit the opportunities for them to and that is a fair point, but it is again interesting to look at and go, but I mean, they 4 possessions in a row, the Seahawks didn't score in the second half and you were able to get back. And so it's like they can lock it down almost when they want to, but I mean, you can't have guys like Everson Griffin disappearing for like the entire first 3 weeks of the season. You can't have veteran football players, Darian Thompson, Xavier Woods, who are not, these aren't really young guys anymore. These are guys who are, Thompson's in his 5th year in the league. Xavier Woods is in his 4th. They've played tons of football. You can't have guys who just get caught peeking in the backfield and don't, just kind of fall asleep at the wheel and don't understand their assignments. And so that's why I say it's like a lot of really bad. Some of the mistakes you're seeing veterans make are of a rookie level, which is funny because some of the rookies we're seeing right now, CeeDee Lamb, Trayvon Diggs, they're playing with veteran IQ and they're making high IQ plays. Trayvon Diggs punching out the ball on the goal line. The 3rd busted touchdown, I think, against the Seahawks. You see Trayvon Diggs pointing to Tyler Lockett and telling people in the secondary, I'm letting him go. Somebody pick him up. He's pointing and signaling to somebody off on the other side. And an entire other half of field full of veterans didn't pick him up. It was the rookie who called it out correctly, and the veterans are the ones who dropped the ball. And
I think some of that, like I said, comes from his receiving background, his work with his brother, Stephon. But I also think, regardless of what this season ends up being, it's not terrible that you're getting so many of these young guys on the football field and meaningful playing time at a lot of these positions.
Sure, as long as it doesn't.
It's going to help them with cap. It's going to help them when they renegotiate contracts.
Yeah, I mean, you
just hope for get another injury.
I think the reps are helpful. It is interesting to me, though, that, they say that Brandon Carr is going to be playing a little more corner. Darrell Worley is going to play a little more corner. Less of this going back and forth between safety because they're just so thin at corner right now with their injuries. But then Brandon Carr goes out there and plays 3 snaps at corner. It's like, okay, well, you couldn't have put him in at safety at all because Brandon Carr, I promise you, would not have made those IQ mistakes. That's a veteran guy who understands. It's just
I saw him working off to the side with Trayvon Diggs the other day, which I thought was interesting. Just those two one-on-one.
That's a good person for Trayvon Diggs to be working with. That's the exact right person to talk to Trayvon Diggs and help him out. And Trayvon Diggs has done some good things, but Trayvon Diggs is also a rookie, and he's still been burned a couple times, and he's still had some rookie mistakes a few times. And so
it's just fascinating to me that year in and year out, it's no surprise that this is an issue for this team.
Well, and I mean,
now all of a sudden appreciating Jeff Heath and Byron Jones's contributions to this defense.
Well, it's one of those things where, last year we were all left kind of wondering, why is this football team 8-8? How can they win 6 games this season by 20 points? How can they go? And then they lose to the Jets, and they lose to, an Eagles team that's missing a bunch of guys. What's going on here? How is it that you can go out there and beat the Rams 44-15 and then lose 17-9 and show you can't do anything? And so we were constantly wondering, what is it about this team that they're playing down below expectations, either analytical expectations or just their talent level? This year, there is no question. You do not have to wonder, why is this team 1-2? It's staring you in the face. That secondary is awful, and the defense overall as a whole has just not been very good or very disciplined.
It's terrible. What was that stat that we had this week? Was it 97 points, 1,200 yards through 3 games, franchise worst through 3 games? It's ugly baby right now. It's an ugly baby. And it's so hard for people to look at this team and say, that's a cute baby. It is an ugly baby. And like I said, I get some of the injuries, but I got to think as a fan, this has been a very challenging year, but I do believe there's a level of apathy at this point.
Well, and I guess the interesting thing for me, and obviously we're 3 weeks into the season, a lot can change. They started out 3 weeks into the season last year. Everybody was going, can they go 16-0? Wow, this looks like the best offense in football. They're beating everybody by 20 points. It's still a long season. They can turn this around. They can do things differently. Goodness knows, if you look at some of their history, they were 5-3 in 2017, just beat the Chiefs, looked to be going on the way up, and then they crashed and burned. And 2018, they started out 3-5, and then they made the playoffs, and they got it. They won a playoff game, and then last year started out hot and fizzled. So it'd be totally within the realm of the Cowboys to, all of a sudden change exactly what they are a couple weeks into the season. But it is interesting to look at, like you said, 97 points given up, over 1,200 yards. That's the most in franchise history through 3 games. They've picked up over 1,400 yards of offense through the first 3 games. They're the first team in NFL history to have a losing record while doing that in the first 3 games. And so I'm going to be interested
to see. So many dubious stats.
Depending on what the Cowboys do, if this continues to be a struggle deep into the season, I'll be interested to see if Jerry and Steven look at this and say, okay, was Mike McCarthy not the guy for this job, or are we going to have to do some house cleaning and partner up with Mike McCarthy to say, what kind of guys do you need who are going to be able to do what you need to do? And if it's going to be a reset for some of these players.
And I do think it's interesting, the Kellen Moore decision from Mike McCarthy, the letting the team sort of handle the personnel. It's going to be very easy for him to say at the end of the season, hey, it wasn't all me.
Yeah. Or it could be easy to let go of just about anybody, not just Kellen Moore, but a lot of these defensive coaches. It's not unreasonable to think Mike Nolan could be one and done if they continue to struggle. You've got a lot of guys in the secondary who their contracts are running out. Xavier Woods, Jordan Lewis, Cheeto, they're all out. Their contracts are all done. And so there's a chance for them to clean house if they want to, in terms of with personnel. So if this is a year where they struggle, I'll be interested to see how much do they feel the reset button needs to be hit. Also, with Dak Prescott entering a contract negotiation again next offseason, how much do they feel the need to reset some of their personnel versus potentially reset some of their coaching staff versus just say it's COVID and we didn't get a look at this team the way Mike McCarthy wanted to build them up from an offseason program forward. And so we're just going to call that a wash and move forward. Part of me believes that it would probably be the latter, that Jerry and Steven would look at it and go, you know what, it was such a weird year, we're writing it off. We like our team, we like our staff, we're going to go forward.
Because you have to admit that you did something wrong.
Yeah.
I also think when we look at the contracts that were doled out over the last couple of years, with the exception of Ezekiel Elliott, some of those contracts aren't looking so good. DeMarcus Lawrence, one of them that sort of disappeared. I'm wondering if there is an injury deal that's holding him
he's hurt.
back. He's got the knee injury, didn't practice on Wednesday and Thursday. Friday was limited. Looks like he's going to play this weekend. Some good news, at least for the offensive line and Dak Prescott, as I read the injury report that came out here today. Didn't practice on Wednesday, which still very fascinating to me because he was out there. Limited on Thursday, limited on Friday. He's listed as questionable. I think there's a good chance he plays on Sunday.
I think he probably plays on Sunday. I think he's going to be good to go this week. I don't think it was as close as the Cowboys seemed to be making it out to be the last 2 weeks. I don't think there was any chance he was playing the last 2 weeks, and I think he had a big hand in that. And I think that he's probably more comfortable. If he's going to play this Sunday, that means, to me anyway, that Tyron Smith feels more comfortable with where he's at, more than the coaching staff all of a sudden feels he's ready.
And then quick update on Lel Collins this week when I reached out to a source on that one. Still the most interesting, confusing situation.
The most confusing situation since Lucky Whitehead.
I don't know if I'd go there. Lucky was an interesting player on this roster for things completely unrelated. But I do think I was told that he was able to work out this summer. In other words, my handle on that was like run on the treadmill, do some lifting, no different than I do in my condo during COVID. But when it came to the actual like moving bodies around on the offensive line and some of the work that came with it, this hip injury was nagging. And my question was, well, why not just go get surgery? And I was told, which didn't really make sense, but if it was week 10 and they were 0-8, which again doesn't add up, they'd probably be looking at getting surgery for him. So there's that. Then we're also told he wasn't conditioned. So was he not conditioned because of this nagging hip injury that popped up at some point? Something's going on with him. He's kind of low fish at practice when we've seen him out there. I don't know if this is more mental with him, and I wouldn't knock him for that. I know a lot of people have dealt with that with COVID. I don't know, and I probably shouldn't, and I won't speculate here. But I do think there's some levels to this. I don't know what it is, but there's levels to it. I mean,
I'm trying to remember what it was. It may have been back in February. I saw him out at a gym, out at a facility when I was, checking out some draft prospects, and he looked fine then. But again, that was pre-quarantine. That was when a lot of guys' workout habits changed. A lot of them, we interviewed all those prospects leading up to the draft who were talking about, I'm, using tires in my, barn or whatever to like get a workout in, or I'm, James Morgan, like, oh yeah, my family is like simulating being defensive ends, like coming at me. And it may have just been a case where Lel was one of those victims of not having the right tools to stay where he needed to be. Now, I do think, I think it was a conditioning thing when camp first started. And Mike McCarthy, I believe it was David Hellman tweeted this out. On August 15th, I think Mike McCarthy said, nothing we're worried about with Lel Collins. So I do think something's changed. Either something was made worse, or they discovered something, or something happened in August. But I think something definitely changed. I think right now you wouldn't just have him, still on IR for just a conditioning issue. There's something clearly wrong with him health-wise.
One of the many mysteries as it applies to this team and our inability to actually go in a locker room and do some digging. And as Jory Epstein told us, her experience has been the same. We can't get players to get back to us. Thanks, Mike. So I call some BS on some of the stuff that's happening this year as it relates to COVID and our ability to report. We want to introduce a new segment here on the Boys and Girl podcast.
Don't BS me right now, okay?
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Bullshit, 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 bullshit.
For the record, have you ever used steroids, human growth hormone, or any other performance-enhancing substance?
No.
Bullshit, bullshit, bullshit.
I don't understand. How are we BSing you?
Exactly. I'm BS proof.
All right, so this is a new segment. Bobby Calls BS. This is actually created and named by Jane Slater. We were out there on Thursday, and I was sharing another one of my famous Cowboys conspiracies, which anybody on the beat, anybody who works with us will tell you I'm always throwing out that I don't think we're getting the absolute truth, whether it be from the Cowboys or, an American Idol result or like whatever it is. Like, I think we're being duped consistently. And so
Idol's still on.
So, I mean, I don't know. I'm just talking about like back in the day. Like, I don't believe Jennifer Hudson was seriously the 8th place on American Idol. I think there was some foolishness going on there, but
she's got pipes.
She does. So the first thing I want to address here is that CeeDee Lamb's reduction in snaps in the second half of last Sunday's game was about load management. Here's Mike McCarthy earlier in the week.
Mike, CeeDee Lamb was on the field for the last few plays. Is he healthy, or is he just part of a rotation that's why he wasn't out there for that?
Yeah, I think like anything, there's a number of things that go on during the course of the game. Communication and things like that. I think CD, if you look at just pure workload in training camp, he's clearly 1 and 2 at the top of the number of plays and how much work he's done. So, I think he was, a little affected in the game, from workload too. So, but at the end of the day, we dressed 6 receivers. I could see right away starting in training camp, Dak has great confidence in all those guys. It was the first time we went with 10 personnel, 4 wide receivers into the game. So, yeah, those guys are playing a lot of reps. A lot of reps.
Okay, now that one is certified garbage, and I will tell you why. And Jane can tell you if she thinks I'm crazy.
Which, by the way, if you aren't watching us on YouTube, you should just see Bobby's face as he even just references this.
Because it is, 100% we're being lied to. I believe that we are being lied to. I'll put it up here on the screen here. This is CeeDee Lamb running back a punt against the Seahawks last Sunday in the third quarter. After that punt return, where you clearly see his ankle get rolled up in the turf, and it looks bad. It looked like it could have been a really bad injury. He did not come out and play the very next series. Up to that point, he had played about 80% of the snaps. After that, he played 40% the rest of the way. He missed the final 5 snaps of the game when the Cowboys most needed a touchdown. I don't buy that that's when you make the decision to start getting into load management is, when you need a touchdown at the end of the fourth quarter and you're going to Noah Brown instead. So I'm not saying that I think it's a serious injury that's going to keep him out this week or anything like that, but I think he was hurt, and I think that's why he was out of the game. I just think that he wasn't in a place to be as effective because there's no way you can pop up and not have that ankle hurt you. So am I crazy, Jane?
I think you're reaching a little bit, mostly based on the fact that I saw him at practice this week, especially working with special teams, and I didn't see anything there. I think it's very possible that he pulled up with something and they said, we need this kid. We don't need another injury. We're just going to have you just sit over there for a little bit. We've got 3 other wide receivers to use. I think if you had kept him in the game, he might have exacerbated said injury, but, we'll see.
That's why I say I'm not saying it's necessarily going to keep him out, but I think that the reasons given to us are
I think it's semantics with McCarthy sometimes.
Semantics is a really gracious way of describing how Mike McCarthy plays with the facts sometimes.
But fans love to see it because he's given them what we're being led to believe is a competitive advantage. Haven't seen it translate just yet, but
it's the Matrix. You you want to be told everything's all right, and you don't want to take the red pill and see how deep the rabbit hole goes. But number 2, the other thing I'm calling BS on, Stephen Jones earlier this week, he says the Cowboys are confident that their personnel in the secondary can get the job done. Here he is on 105.3 The Fan.
Do you anticipate bringing in any defensive backs or safeties to look at it all this week?
Not at this point, no. We've got, hopefully, we got some guys who are coming our way in terms of, guys coming off the 3-week IR and really feel like, with what we have in our camp right now, had a couple of guys we brought on the practice squad that made some headway last week that aren't quite ready, but overall feel like we got the guys here on campus ultimately that can get the job done for us.
All right. I don't believe this. I think this is just a vote of confidence early in the season. I think maybe they don't feel like there's somebody they want to go out and get involved with right away. Maybe Steven didn't want to keep the door open for Earl Thomas by saying, yeah, we're interested in people the way Gary had. Sure.
Thanks, Steven.
But I think that what we're looking at here is similar to, and I've made this comparison in recent weeks, I think we're looking at what they did with the running backs in 2015, where they said, nah, DeMarco, we don't need you. You can go on. We're going to do by committee. And then they went, okay, let's go trade for Kristen Michael. Let's go sign Robert Turbin. 2018. Bye, Des. We don't need you. We can do the committee. Let's go sign Bryce Butler. Okay, that didn't work. Let's go trade for Amari Cooper. I think similar thing. They said, bye, Byron Jones. The first Hail Mary was, let's bring back Brandon Carr. We got to do something. And I think eventually they're either going to have to go trade for a veteran, sign somebody off the street. They're going to have to do something. And I think Stephen Jones knows that. And he knows that this personnel, no matter when they get healthy or not, this personnel is not going to be the type of secondary that can win them a Super Bowl.
So my theory is a little different. Perhaps it's a bit of a conspiracy theory. I'm not saying the Cowboys have given up on this season. Jerry always wants his teams to be competitive, but given the challenges with COVID, and they've all said it, and sort of given the false start that Mike McCarthy got as a head coach, why go and spend a bunch of money or trade right now in the secondary when you do have guys that are going to come back in a couple of weeks? But why go buy a luxury outfit? I say outfit because I haven't gone shopping this year to get any fancy clothes for game day. It's not that I've given up on the season. I'm just like, point. I don't have anyone to really show it off to when I'm at the field. There's not a lot of fans. I'm wearing more tennis shoes than I do heels. I've just sort of leaned in a little bit. And it's a terrible comparison, but that's kind of how I've looked at it for the Cowboys.
So you think just Stephen Jones doesn't want the, tight leopard print mini skirt. He wants the yoga pants, and he thinks yoga pants are going to be good enough.
I think he's shopping at Target this year instead of Neiman's.
Okay. All right. I just think that I think whether it's they look at it and go, look, we got some comp picks coming from Randall Cobb and Robert Quinn and everything. We're going to have a surplus of picks. Let's move a fifth rounder for somebody's, nickel corner that they've fallen out of love with. Or, let's go find a team that has a surplus of corners that is in need of a receiver. We've got a plethora of them. Let's move a Noah Brown or a Cedric Wilson.
Why give it up this year? I mean, those might be valuable for you next offseason.
Maybe you don't. But I think that if you get into this season,
they've got to get Dak's contract done. We've seen him already kind of making money moves.
I think if you get into the season and go, or you get further into the season, you go, okay, we've kind of righted some of our wrongs and we feel good about a lot of aspects of our team. I think that health and time is one of the only position that will not be fixed by health and time and things like that is the secondary. And so if everything else is working for you midway through the season, I think you may go, we're going to have to bolster the secondary somehow.
I see, and I'm wondering if they're more concerned about the offensive line and the health of some of their veterans, that they're saving their pennies in the event they have to do. It's more important to protect their quarterback than it is to protect the end zone from the passing game at this point, in my opinion.
Well, we got finally here on what Bobby calls BS. Before we talk to Marc Sessler from around the NFL about his beloved Cleveland Browns, final one here. I'm calling BS on the idea that there was enough audience demand for a Borat sequel that Sacha Baron Cohen had to actually make another film.
This is a terrible take.
The first one was great. The first one was great. It doesn't have a lot of replay value because I feel like you're more just kind of shocked by like all the initial reactions and stuff. It's not like super sharp writing. It's more fun reality TV of sorts or a prank show. So that doesn't have a long shelf life. But I got to say, 14 years later, now you're putting up a sequel on Amazon when everybody knows it, knows who Borat is. So I don't buy that anybody's
now,
really
wait a minute. There's a whole nother younger
scripted
generation that is not familiar with him.
I don't think so. I
don't typically love reboots. You know how I feel about this.
Go 25 years later then. You're going to make an R-rated film 14 years later? That's not the... I
kind of love that instead of a monokini, it is a mask.
Well, you and Sacha Baron Cohen are the only ones who thought there should have been a sequel, I guess. Because I don't think there's enough demand to justify doing this 14. This feels like Fuller House, making the Full House sequel or...
Listen, I hate the reboots. I hate the sequels, like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Can't say I'm buying into that one, even
my
though
wife
I'm a
was
big
super
Keanu Reeves
disappointed.
fan.
She was so excited. She's so disappointed at how it was.
But I think that making Borat now, I feel like these days you can't be as edgy as you used to be in comedy. So
what if he comes out here and he's PC Borat?
Not everybody, but that's my point, is not everybody's like sometimes when I go back and I watch stuff on Friends, Sex and the City, you name it, I'm like, man, I don't know if you get away with that right now. You know, people aren't laughing a lot, and they shouldn't. There's been a lot of serious stuff going on, but I think it's harder to be edgier. I watched the South Park special the other day on the pandemic.
We did too, and my wife made
very edgy.
My wife made us turn it off when she saw the bat. When she saw the part with Randy
with Mickey Mouse and them in the streets.
When she saw the bat, she was like, "Okay, turn this off." I was like, "Okay." So I'll have to go back and finish it by myself. She didn't.
I think how edgy South Park has been over the years, and it was one of those that I used to sneak over to my friend Chris Hickman's house and watch it because my parents wouldn't let me, and I would just snicker, and I thought it was the funniest thing ever, and I'm like, "This is edgy." So that's my thought on that.
I mean, I think you can't say the same things you said on TV, 15, 20 years ago. I sometimes just look at tweets from 2 years ago and go, man, if somebody dug out this 2-year-old tweet, you'd be canceled. Not you, but I mean, just in general, anybody.
That's fair.
So I don't know. Let's talk to Marc Sessler now, see if he has any old tweets that could potentially get him canceled.
All right, I am so excited to welcome in this guest, Marc Sessler, writer and one of 4 talented hosts on the Around the NFL podcast, which, by the way, love that you guys are now on our TVs. That's Friday nights, correct, Marc?
It's actually, it used to be on Fridays, and it's now on Saturday mornings at 5 o'clock where we live in Los Angeles in the morning. So I don't know what sort of, and I think it took a pandemic for us to get on to NFL Network. I'll always view Corona as sort of the trigger on that one. So, but yeah, it's basically our weekly preview show that's on Saturdays now. And it airs again at, I think, 7 at night on the West Coast. I'm not an expert with all the times, but it's on there. You can find it if you could TiVo it, whatever you need to do.
Well, it is a dynamic show with dynamic personalities. I love all 4 of you. Erica Tamposi too. Let's put her in the mix. Your producer.
We better mention her. She's not going to be happy if you don't mention her. So
Ricky Hollywood. But as much as I've wanted to have you on a podcast to talk existential threats and all sorts of weird things, because you and I can really go deep on stuff.
Oh yeah.
I want to talk to you about something near and dear to your heart. This is a Cowboys podcast, but this week our worlds collide. The Browns are coming to Dallas. What are your thoughts, Marc?
It's in another world, this team would have been rolling into Dallas 0-3, and you're kind of, as a Browns fan, programmed to psychologically let the season float away by early October, because it typically has. I mean, if you look at their history, it's funny. The other night I was watching this 1994 game when Bill Belichick was the Browns coach.
And it
was right. That's what I do at nights at this point.
Hey, that's what I do too. I do those same sort of things. I've got a stack of old games. So yeah, I go through all of them.
Well, you know this one, that maybe it was the clash between Belichick and Barry Switzer, and the Browns won at the last second. Eric Turner stopped, a Cowboys receiver at the goal line. So I was looking at this, like, that's the last time that a Browns-Cowboys game had any meaning to it. So I think when you're asked what I'm feeling, it's like, I'm feeling strange that this game, I think, for both teams is a pivotal moment heading into, the second quarter pole of the season after Sunday.
So you aren't feeling dangerous, as Bobby is today, and has clearly wants our listeners that are not watching this on YouTube. I always enjoy some of his hidden messages. Bobby, you're feeling dangerous today. Why?
I'm asking, are we feeling dangerous? I'm feeling, I don't know. Maybe I'm feeling a little just pro Longhorns today. So I've got the sarcastic, are we feeling dangerous behind me? I've got the Longhorns up here today after Oklahoma lost last week, and Texas was able to beat Texas Tech. It doesn't matter that, they should have lost that game, and it was actually pathetic that it got that long. They count in the standings all the same, just like Dallas beating Atlanta. So we're gonna be happy with it, and we'll take 2-0 while LSU and OU and all those others are 1-1. But I am curious about Baker. it's funny. He came onto the scene, and I think a lot of people felt like, it was a shock in the first place that he was picked as the first overall pick. It was something that wasn't really on anybody's radar. It didn't seem like as a realistic choice anyway, until about a day or so before the draft. Comes onto the scene, has a pretty good rookie year, and then last year everything kind of fell apart for him. And then so far this season, they are 2-1, but they've leaned heavily on the running game. Baker's not doing, a ton of stuff downfield. It's been a lot of safe throws for Baker so far this year. What's your assessment of Baker at this point, and what kind of a player do you think we can say he is, 2 years and 3 games into his career now?
Yeah, I think, maybe we all have a moment in our own careers where you kind of think that you're a little farther along than you are, and maybe you lose your head a little bit. And I think that happened to Baker Mayfield last year. And I think that happened to him combined with the Freddie Kitchens coaching experience. And you just hear from some Browns players, and really the whispers began kind of at the Pro Bowl after that season and continued, that they were a disorganized mess, that players individually didn't have, tangible goals. They weren't given those. That games, that you saw the players lashing out at coaches on the sideline by the end of the year. And some of that was that they just said, you didn't have like a game plan after the first couple drives. So I think that the whole arrival of Kevin Stefanski, who flew down right away to meet Baker before Corona hit and stuff, just to stress, we're going to build an organized offense. Every player on this offense is going to have a clear role. They're going to know what it is. You're going to have weekly, monthly, annual goals. And every player has just sort of talked about how everything has changed and evolved from where they were. So you're seeing more cohesiveness. And when it comes to Baker, I think last year he thought, well, there's so much disorganization around me. I'm going to have to try to save the game, save the day, week after week. And it was a disaster. I think he may be, as a rookie, when he was feeling dangerous and all that stuff was happening, it's almost like it's better as some of these rookie quarterbacks, when you don't really know what you don't know, you can kind of be free and lean on instincts. But then suddenly, he was in Kitchens was his third coach, and essentially third kind of scheme. I mean, even though it didn't look like the offense from the year before, they leaned on all these 3 wide sets. There was a lot of forcing the ball to Odell Beckham. This year, I think they're saying, look, Kevin Stefanski is bringing the offense largely from what Minnesota was a year ago. Run heavy, use our tight ends. We can still have good wide receivers, but don't put the quarterback in a position typically to have to throw the ball 50, 60 times. With everyone healthy, it's really worked. And so I think most Browns fans or people watching the team would say, I don't mind this version of Baker. I think he can do more. And I think Sunday is definitely going to be a time where you're going to see them throw the ball more based on what Dallas is and what Cleveland is in general. It has the makings of a shootout. I think we can all see that. That would be a test for Baker Mayfield, because when they got off their game script in week 1 against Baltimore, and that was week 1 and they hadn't had any preseason, it was an epic disaster. So the last 2 games, I think, represent what they want to be. And the test against Dallas for Baker and everyone else would be, can you control the way this game looks? Because that, to me, is something that they've not been able to do against better offenses.
I got to tell you, Bobby, when I look at this game, I don't feel good for Dallas, which is crazy. I mean, the fact that we could be talking on Monday about the Browns beating the Cowboys, especially with Mike McCarthy as a coach. But to your point, yeah, they're running the ball more, but when you look at this secondary in Dallas, I'd be throwing the ball. Wouldn't you, Bobby? I mean, just look, we covered this week, the busted coverages, the Chidobe Awuzie, Anthony Brown on IR, and Trayvon Diggs. It was like a little bit of load management this week. I'd be throwing the ball all day if I was them, not to mention you've got guys like Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry. But have you noticed that they're gelling more?
I think they are, and I think that there's probably just, first of all, I don't underestimate the injuries that Odell Beckham was dealing with a year ago and played through. And Jarvis, had off-season surgery too. So these guys were, Jarvis was the heart of the team last season. I think the Odell thing, from an outside viewpoint, I say 2 things. That I think that Baker Mayfield was the alpha male of that team in 2018. And when Odell Beckham comes in, I think it changed the sort of the dynamic of the huddle and everything around it. And there was a lot of forcing the ball to Odell Beckham, and a lot of it didn't go well. And I think this year, again, it's just that they're going to give it to Beckham when it makes sense. And Beckham had a comment this week that one of his personal goals, is to have Nick Chubb be the leading rusher. Now, I don't think that's just lip service. I think they are buying into the team concept. it is fair to wonder if the Odell Beckham experience will ever really maximize the way it did in New York. I don't know if it's that type of offense. I don't like when there's this pressure for Odell to have these big games because it's not controllable the way I think other teams with their passing attacks function. I mean, Dallas for one of them. You could look at Seattle. It's like you can look at those teams and you know what those wide receivers typically are going to produce. As a group, it's going to be large. I mean, I think with Odell, it's been underwhelming because other parts of the team have been working it the way they want to. But for this whole thing that Odell Beckham is a drama magnet, he's never really complained. I just think that there's pressure. There was a moment when another player scored last week that Baker ran up to Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham and put his arms around them and he just said, patience, it's going to come. And so I think I don't think that's lip service either. I think that they mean that. I think that it's a part of Baker Mayfield's makeup to want to shine with Odell Beckham. And, there are going to be games where that's necessary. I would point again to Sunday. You're not going to play the Bengals and Washington, every week. And those were games where they are able to control their environment. I just think that will melt away pretty quickly when you play better teams.
Well, I also feel like it's going to be a bit of a home field advantage for Baker because there are so many OU fans that love that guy. So I think it could be very interesting on Sunday.
Yeah. When I watched all the Browns' first 3 games this week just to try and get an idea of them. And when you look at not just what they are on film, but you also look at, just some of the statistics and some of the more like down and distance type of figures that the Browns are running with. And last year when Kevin Stefanski was the offensive coordinator for Minnesota, he ran the ball with the Vikings 37 times against the Cowboys. That was the most anybody ran it against the Cowboys all last year. Heading into this year, the Browns are first in the NFL by a wide margin in running it on first down. They're doing that 71% of the time. They're running it the second most of any team, the second highest rate of any team in the NFL. They're running it about 53% of the time. They've got Nick Chubb. They've got Kareem Hunt, who obviously is a little banged up right now. But just some of the issues.
Forget about Kareem Hunt being there,
know,
right?
Yeah,
right. We haven't talked about him this year.
No, and he still does. It's funny. They get so much from Nick Chubb in terms of I would argue he may be the best cutback runner in the NFL. That guy sees the game so much faster than it seems like everybody else who's on the field, and he can find those holes and he can cut back. Whereas Kareem Hunt just comes in and just starts trying to run over people and bowl over people and is just a physically punishing runner. But I think with some of the issues Dallas has had with tackling over the last year and some of the stuff they've had with their linebackers over pursuing and being a little too aggressive, and then, it's a cutback and it's 20 extra yards and things like that. I do kind of wonder if Kevin Stefanski says, look, I beat this Cowboys team last year running the ball almost 40 times. I've got these 2 guys. I don't see any differences on this defense right now. Do you think there's a chance that even as weak as the secondary is, that Cleveland still says we're going to play our game because we think our game is just too much for Dallas to handle?
I definitely do, because I think the secondary plays into the way the Browns want to run the ball. Nick Chubb is a yards, after contact dude, and so is Kareem Hunt, and they both really shine that way. And I think the Browns game after game are going to want that to be their identity. And if it floats away from them and they have to adjust, that's fine. But last year's team would have come out with a completely different game plan against what their identity was. I think that Stefanski is all about this, and they've got the right. The other story for Cleveland is their offensive line, and it has been really, really solid. I would point to a Cowboys connection, Bill Callahan, who came in, and I see the absolute difference in players that last year seemed out of orbit and disorganized, have completely changed their games. There was a guy that John Dorsey signed, Wyatt Teller. I believe he was off the Bills roster, and they traded for him. And it was like, okay, well, not everyone's heard of this guy. He is shining at right guard, and that filled a big hole for them. And you got J.C. Tretter, who's an underrated center, and Joel Bitonio, who's a little banged up too. I would watch that. The Browns, they have not missed a game from Bitonio in his entire career. That is an X factor, or if he's just not fully healthy. But in general, they've been a healthy line. Jed Wills at left tackle, who's had a move over from left tackle. I think without Bill Callahan, that might have taken an extra couple months to work, but he's played pretty well. And so that's their strength. And I think when you have that kind of a line and you're healthy, you're going to want to be what you are. So to your point, yes, I think you're going to see in the first, half, they're going to assess where they are. And then if the game gets out of control because Cleveland's defense is a whole different situation, you might have to go to the skies more generously down the stretch.
You know, Bobby, it reminds me of, remember when the Cowboys made that trip to Washington and it was Bill Callahan who gave them all sorts of fits?
Yeah. Yeah, no, and there's a lot of actually familiarity here because Kevin Stefanski has gone up against Mike McCarthy several times from when they were in the NFC North together. Alex Van Pelt, who's the offensive coordinator in Cleveland right now, he's not calling plays. That's still Stefanski. Alex Van Pelt was on Mike McCarthy's staff for several years in Green Bay. You've got the Bill Callahan connection. There are, some players here that the Cowboys are pretty familiar with. But it is interesting. You mentioned the injury situation and how they are a little banged up on the offensive line. And in fact, the injury report just recently came out. The Browns have 6 players who are questionable: Batonia, Kareem Hunt, Denzel Ward, Jacob Phillips, the linebacker, and their center, Nick Harris. And they've got 3 out: Greedy Williams, Tay Davis, and then Dak Prescott's old foe, Adrian Claiborne, is out this Sunday.
That is something that he should be grateful for.
Yes, you've got 3 you've got 3 players on defense that are out in this game for the Browns, and then you've got some of their other guys who are, clearly banged up, like Denzel Ward. The Browns seem to be able to get home with just their 4 pass rushers. There's not a lot of blitzing from them. They seem to kind of just trust, okay, we're going to get 4 guys, we're going to get home, and we need all the help we can. So all 7 of the rest of you guys are dropping back to cover as much as we can. Given those sort of troubles they've still had, even dropping back that many guys and sort of the issues they have with the injuries right now, how much of a issue do you think Dallas's passing attack is going to be in this sort of up-tempo game that they've been playing? How difficult do you think that's going to be for the Browns on Sunday?
I think it was like one of those like scales where it's like green to red. I'd put it in like the deep crimson red scenario. I really do, because Denzel Ward, they've been good because their stars have been good. Myles Garrett's been as advertised, and he's off to another great season. Denzel Ward is he's a phenomenal cover man. He's fun to watch. He reminds me of old school dudes like Hanford Dixon and Frank Minifield. I mean, he's just reliable and trusty, but he's hurt. You typically see he's often like a little banged up, and he's banged up right now. And Greedy Williams, who was, their high draft pick a year ago, has not seen the field at all. Terrence Mitchell has been a really good cornerback for them, but they lost a guy, Grant Delpit, who was, I believe it was their 2nd round pick. Mm-hmm. And their defensive coordinator, Joe Woods, when he went down, like in the training camp part of the season, he basically said, look, I'm going to be honest with you. Like, we had so much planned around Grant Delpit and what he would do at safety. And I think that disrupted everything for them. They did go and grab a guy. They traded for him, Ronnie Harrison from the Jaguars, who they think is a versatile type of safety that Grant Delpit has been, but he's been playing very little. They're really easing him in. So the secondary is banged up. It's raw. It's vulnerable.
It sounds like the Cowboys.
Yes. Another thing I noticed is the Browns seem to run a lot more base 4-3 than it seems like other teams do. I mean, they're out there with 3 linebackers somewhat consistently. It's not a majority of the time, but it's more frequently than others. Is that just kind of that's their scheme, that's their approach, it's old school, or is that out of necessity? Is there some thinning in the secondary, and is that going to present problems when the Cowboys are trotting out there with 3 receivers and a running back like Tony Pollard potentially, who can also split out and play receiver? I mean, Antonio Gibson, I saw, gave him some issues against Washington, and Pollard's kind of a similar player like that. Is that a concern for them, is just the personnel matchup right now?
It is, because I think what they probably wanted to do was consistently have like 2 linebackers and 5 defensive backs, including Delpit, who they really liked. And being thin in the secondary, they've had to go more 4-3. And I don't think there are 3 linebackers on the Browns right now that you can consistently trust. That like their defense gets weaker as you go along, because you've got Garrett and Sheldon Richardson, who has been really, really good this season. Yeah. The linebacking crew is really young and inexperienced. I think there's future talent there, but they've been getting killed by tight ends and, these scat backs and guys in space. They're not adept at that. And then the secondary, as we talked about before, has issues. So even Washington last week had Dwayne Haskins not thrown like a slew of hideous interceptions, they could have won that game. They made some plays, and I think anyone can make plays against Cleveland's secondary. And so I think it's a bit of a terrifying game from that angle for Cleveland, because, I mean, I'm looking at the last Cowboys game I watched. first quarter, I'm thinking this wide receiver looks best. It's Amari Cooper. Oh no, now it's Michael Gallup. Oh, I think CeeDee Lamb. And then, it's like, oh, Cedric Wilson suddenly has 2 touchdowns. So, there's an embarrassment of riches. They're all really challenging guys to deal with. And I don't think Cleveland has the men to do it. They're going to have to find other ways. I think getting in Dak's face might be the best way to create issues with Myles Garrett, another Texas guy. That's your way.
It's so funny, too, you referenced Myles Garrett. I remember doing a show here locally, CBS 11, and gifting him these awards. And, he was a big kid then, but just how big he is now. It's just weird that I'm getting so old that now Myles Garrett is now, 4 years in the league?
Fourth year in the league.
4th year in the league.
Yeah.
God.
I got to tell you one quick thing about him. I went when teams come to play, at least before, like the Chargers, they would stay in the section of downtown LA that's sort of an 8-block by 8-block cordoned off thing, so they wouldn't float off into Hollywood or Malibu or whatever. And so it was this little sort of downtown area. And I went down to meet a friend who worked for the Browns, and I walked into the hotel lobby, and Myles Garrett walked by me, and I just outside of maybe Jadeveon Clowney, I've never really seen a human being built and who looks like him. And I'm like, it is clear that I could have 7,000 children. They would never look anything like Myles Garrett. He's the most incredible looking specimen I've ever seen in my life. And I was just floored by how big he is. It's the dude is a different looking human being.
He is. Well, you are one of my favorite human beings. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this show for us. And I love your passion for the Browns. I hated seeing it extinguished after that Thursday night football game. I'll never forget Baker Mayfield coming to the set. I was buying into, and I hope that they can string it together at some point.
Well, we'll see, guys. Thanks for having me on, and I hope it's a good game. I think it will be. I think it's going to be a shootout.
We're talking about a Browns-Cowboys game being a good one. You're the best.
Thank you.
Bye, bud.
Thanks, guys.
All right, well, it's good to be back in the chair and doing the show with my man, Bobby Belt. Cowboys fans, I really, really hope for your sake. As Bobby said earlier in the show, you guys have been fairly rational. I'm calling it apathy. I think apathy is going to turn to rage, though, if we're talking about a Cowboys loss at home to the Browns. So I'm hoping for you. You've had to deal with enough in 2020. You certainly don't need that. But also stay tuned to NFL Network this weekend. I have got a feature piece that I am really excited about. An amazing, amazing woman who is the Saints yoga instructor who found out that she had cancer while she was working out with the team. Really good story, really great lady. But it is crucial catch month for the NFL, and it really does talk about the importance of getting yourself checked. Early detection is key. But we will chat with you on the other side.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you would do us a favor, hit subscribe over here. And if you want more Cowboys content, you can check it out over here. Thanks again for watching.